Hello, everybody, and welcome to WASD20. My name is Nate, and this is the Dungeon Master Roundtable. This is our second one of these, and I am joined by some pretty awesome guests tonight. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So, guys, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and like where people might recognize you from and what you do out there in the RPG world, that would be great. We're going to start on the left side with Jordan. Jordan, tell us a little about yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jordan with a silent PH in the middle, and I run a Forgotten Realms lore YouTube channel where we kind of talk about Dungeons & Dragons lore and how that can inspire your games.
Awesome. Yeah, and Jordan's a channel that I've been following for quite a while because I'm kind of a Forgotten lore noob, and I've appreciated that you start branching out into other stuff as well. Got some good reviews and lots of other, like, you got summaries of some of your games, right?
No games. I did some monster videos, and then I've also started a weekly show called the Saturday Morning D&D Show that we stream on Twitch with my co-host Sir Lucian, and that's really fun. And that's just kind of an hour-long show where we talk about our games and then the struggles, or I guess just what kind of ever happened in our games that causes us to think, did we do this right? Did we rule this correctly, or what's going on? And Lucian runs a lot of game online, and I run my home game, and I go to Adventure League. So yeah, and so that's a weekly show. We actually just turned that into a podcast. So if you go to iTunes, you can search Saturday Morning D&D Show. If watching us on Twitch is not your thing, you can now catch us on a podcast format.
Nice.
So
very cool. Cody, tell us a little about yourself.
Hey guys, I'm Cody with Taking 20, not Talking 20, which I saw a commenter say the other day. He was like, "Yeah, I can't believe you're not Talking 20. I'm so sad now." I'm like, how long have you been playing D&D? Yeah, I'm Cody with Taking 20. I do videos and things here on YouTube. We talk about broken spells and how alignment's terrible, and we talk about more serious topics like, you know, Dungeon Master tips, being better at the table behind the screen and stuff like that. I'm also the producer and founder of Saber Dice, which is a weekly Dungeons & Dragons stream right here on YouTube, youtube.com/saberdice, which has, you know, WebDM, it's had Don Forgecast, we've had all kinds of different, Jordan's been on there for a season. We have all kinds of cool creators that you guys might have seen out and around in the Twitch and YouTube communities popping on that.
Awesome.
Oh, Nerdarchy. I'm sorry, Dave, I love you.
And Cody, you've just taken the plunge, if you don't mind me sharing, into like doing RPG stuff full time, right?
Yeah, you know, it's it's not something that we've really announced yet, but yeah, kind of behind the scenes. Don't worry,
Sure.
Nate, I'll just blame you later. Yeah, so I just became a full-time content creator a few weeks ago, and it's been kind of a wild and scary and exciting journey that is just kind of getting the wheels underneath of it right now. So
cool.
We're having a
Sorry
great
about
time.
that.
No, it's cool.
Yeah.
It's cool. Don't tell my
Don't tell my wife I quit my job. Yeah. DBJ, how's it going? Tell us a little about yourself.
Hey. Sure thing. I'm DBJ, Davabrian Jackson. I have a YouTube channel, spelled out. I don't know why I left it that way, but whatever. You'll find me. I do a live stream Monday through Friday at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Another crazy thing that I do, but I am also a contributing writer to Critical Hit Publishing, and my baby is the cinematic environs. I consider myself to be the self-appointed third pillarist of the RPG community, and I poke my head into Absolute Tabletop's Facebook group, of course, at Critical Hit Publishing Facebook group, as well as the RPG Brigade. And I love all things role-playing. I'm kind of an old grognardian that has been around for quite a while, and I hope to have some great input into this conversation.
Yeah, cool, and I'm sure you will. I really love your work within cinematic environs, and I think that that will. I look forward to hearing more about that tonight. There are links
I own a couple of those environs, and they're
There you
awesome.
go.
So.
Yeah, there are links to all these guys' channels in the video description. So go check them out. Make sure you're subscribed, and yeah, they've all three of them got some great videos. So without further ado, let's get on with the topic of combat encounters. So my first question, I've got some questions, and then I already see some questions in the chat here, and I'm going to try to remember because Manan A or whatever asked a really good question. But I want to ask about what exactly do you guys prep when you come to the table? What do you have ready to run combat encounters? Anyone, feel free to jump in there.
Sure. I'll say that I usually start with a purpose. I'd like to, when I start with a combat encounter, I'd like to know like what's the point of having the combat encounter. So it can be something as simple as a bear looking for food, or goblin scouts watching the camping party, or something of that nature, and just pick a general motivation for the adversary, and then I layer on top of it a great place to have a fight.
Awesome.
I'm going to sound really boring because my home group loves combat. Like they love basically fighting for the sake of fighting, like the tactical combats. So when I run off to Kobold Fight Club, and I'll pick an area and a monster type that's kind of in the theme of the area that my players are at, and I'll go through different CRs and be like, this sounds cool, and I'll build a whole bunch of those, and then I kind of pull from them at random when I need to. And the thing I like to throw in sometimes is environmental stuff, which the environs help a whole bunch, because you'll have like, well, okay, we're going to fight scorpions today, but I'm going to throw in a sandstorm or something like that to I don't know, mix it up a little bit. And that's after lots of combats, because my players have gotten to the point where it's like, well, just whittling down HP is not as fun anymore. So they want to have something extra, and I try to throw that in there. Not all the time, but sometimes. Cool.
Yeah, I mean, my strategy kind of echoes Jordan. It's like, when I'm thinking about combat, first thing I always ask myself is, what's fun? What's something that would be cool at the table? What's something that the players would, be like, oh, kind of have that reaction of, oh my gosh, it's a zombie beholder. What is interesting and fun, and of course, what fits CR? What can I make fit CR? What fits the environment a little bit? But that's always where I start when I am preparing. Is okay. Let's set out a relatively appropriate CR encounter. Sometimes I throw those out the window, right? Party's level 5, just throw a bunch of CR5s at them. That's a way deadly encounter. They'll be fine if they got full life. And so I always will ask kind of what's fun, and then kind of prep out my encounters from that.
Cool.
Point.
I was muted. That's awesome. Yeah, no, that's very cool.
It's like, oh God.
I first off, I just threw off our overlay because I'm a dummy. Secondly, people are saying there's some audio sync issues, and I'm sorry guys, I don't know what to do about it. I have like very minor audio syncs, and I imagine it's hopefully only like a second or two for the guests, and I apologize guys, I'm not quite sure what's going on there. Yeah, we'll be all
survive.
Right.
I thought I saw in the chat that we're having video sync issues,
Okay.
but the audio.
Yeah, I think by that I think they mean like the audio is not totally matching up with how our mouths are moving, or specifically with you guests. So sorry, guests.
We'll just have
there you
to
go.
talk like this.
We're actually 3 puppets that Nate is controlling.
Oh,
so.
man.
Start a great game of Feng Shui right now.
Oh, that's
There
right.
you go.
Sorry, I'm a little bit distracted by my overlay screw up. Oh man, I worked so hard, guys. Hold on one moment.
I'm looking at it's beautiful.
Cody, I
Nate.
just want
I
want to see your full
overlay.
screen, buddy. I just want to see that full beautiful green screen, and I can't right now.
There we go.
So I'm gonna tinker just a second.
No problem. So I mean, so let's do this while he's talking about that. Is there anything that you guys like prep specifically?
That's a great
for
question.
your
Yeah, so like
encounters?
nitty gritty, like what do you have at the table, like physically?
Oh, so behind me you can see I ended up picking up the Castle Ravenloft and the Legend of Dritz board games strictly for the miniatures. Like I wanted to have a whole bunch of miniatures, and miniatures are expensive. And then I have also like printed off a bunch of paper miniatures. I find a bunch of them online. I'll purchase PDFs of paper miniatures. And luckily where I work, they don't care that I print out stuff for free. So I'm printing out all kinds of stuff and on like card stock and things like that, which is awesome. And I'm able to come home and cut it out. But I have like usually a box full of minis next to me because I hate when combat starts and it's like we have to pause everything. People have already rolled initiative. They have all of their numbers ready. And I'm like, okay, where do I want to place this guy? Oh, I can't find that miniature. I can't find this. So I usually have it right next to me that I can kind of just like dump it out there as soon as possible to keep things going.
Conversely, as a theater of the mind guy, I don't have a home group. I do everything, I game online, and I'm pretty fumble fingered when it comes to technology. So I scrounge the internet for as many pictures as I can, anything visual, and I grab a bunch of stat blocks and just reskin them. There's a couple of go-tos I love, like Nagas and Ogre Magi and Hags, and then I just reskin the hell out of everything if I'm stuck, and, and that's it. Throw a ton of minions, and that I'm done. Anything more than that, I'm very visual when it comes to like I love movies, so I think like a movie scene. So I always think of like stunts and such, like rope bridges or chases or torrential rainstorms and mudslides and things like that. So I'll throw something like that in there and just like foreshadow it before the game starts. Hey, it's starting to rain now, and then I can kick it into full gear if I want to.
I actually run games both like for my home group, and then I do a ton of gaming online. So when you're gaming online, if you're not just purely theater of the mind, right. It takes some prep work. Like it legitimately takes some prep work. I think the best thing that I could tell DMs to do if they're running a lot of games online on like things like Fantasy Grounds and stuff like that, is to have a good collection of like setup maps. And it doesn't have to be like overly specific, this is this one scene with the exact, bridge is exactly on the left. You could have, if you pre-set up like 10 maps, you got, a few forest maps, you got a couple of camp scenes set up, you've got, a couple of city maps and some caves, and those are just kind of there. You can always plop down those, you can always plop down your encounter specifically on those. One thing that I try to avoid whenever I'm running games online is because oftentimes if you do like these big digital maps and you've got these big beautiful dungeons all laid out and the dynamic lighting is set up and all these different tokens and everything, a lot of times if you just worry about using that too much in your prep, that your players will, when they finish an encounter or they finish a scene, kind of a room, exploring a room, you'll just start seeing them like edge their token over a little bit. They'll start moving their tokens like their players are moving. And that's one thing that I try. I'm like, guys, listen, don't worry about it. When and if we actually need a scene in here, I will move and I will set your tokens up for that next room or that next area. Meanwhile, I still kind of have the map down as a really great visual like base and foundation for me when I'm describing, okay, you're coming up to a fork. There's, the corridor to the left kind of cuts down and then it looks like it fades off into the distance. Whatever you're doing there, it still is a good visual for the dungeon master to describe the dungeon kind of very cinematic. And then whenever you actually need to go into those rooms and your players are exploring those and they're getting attacked by ghouls coming down the hallway, then you can just say, okay, guys, and move their tokens over and kind of take control from them so that they're not trying to ruin the encounters ahead of time by edging up their tokens like they're actually exploring it, kind of like a video game. So that's one thing that I would tell people is, maps matter, but don't be afraid if you have like a big cave map, that can be your generic map because one section of the cave, if you're doing it this way, can be your encounter. And you don't have to worry about, well, I used this map 3 times. Your players don't need to know that. So.
There's 2 questions or challenges in the
I like
in
those.
the chat. Yeah, Jimmy Bob and Karza 37. How can I make tactical combat interesting for low levels and not the same old, same old? And then this is a great question to our amazing panel. How would you make a goblin encounter great and an
Yeah,
interesting
so
challenge?
and that kind of relates to one of the
I love
previous
it.
questions too. Is like, how do you,
Yep.
in levels 1 to 4, make them really interesting? I mean, I think that almost implies maybe that the more interesting ones use these amazingly crazy powerful monsters, and that can make for an interesting combat. But there are obviously lots of other ways, and I actually had a question too that that I prepared for you guys that kind of relates to it, so we can maybe ball this all up in one. And that's just, how do you keep combat just from being tick tack, you know, hit miss, hit miss, hit, and just kind of like just back and forth. Like, I mean, that's not very exciting. So how do you, let's talk about that in general, and then let's take on the goblin challenge. So first, in general, how do you make combat more interesting than that, especially at low levels?
I've got 3 or 4 touchstones that I use. One is motivation. Just come up with a really cool motivating force for your low level baddies. So what I mean is that every encounter doesn't need to be lethal. Like I hit you and you hit me. It could be that they're motivated by something else. A creature just wants to steal the backpack of one of the player characters, or one of the enemies, like a giant spider, just wants to snatch one of the player characters and then runs off. Or there are goblins who just want to steal the copper out of the purse of one of the player characters. Just something giving the enemy an objective that's narratively consistent and kind of kooky, and just changing it up so that every encounter isn't like a fight to the death, especially at lower levels, and you can really have some fun with it. I've been actually role playing for like 40 years now, and yeah, 78. So it comes a point where once the encounters start to get boring, you have to do something different. And when I was a teenager, I had a bunch of a goblin horde or something. It was a dice log, and I had like the last 5 goblins just steal the treasure and run. And the player, we're teenagers, and player characters were just like, what? I was like, no, they're sneaking out the back door. And, they want to fight the big bad, and they're casting spells, and the goblins are just like tiptoeing away. And it became this running joke. And when the other guy started running games, the same 5 goblins would show up, and they'd be in town, and they'd steal like copper pieces, or like they'd steal pies out of windows. They would like steal shoes. They would it just became this running gag. And that became a big motivating force for me. Like every creature doesn't want to fight to the death, but they can be a problem. So I use motivation's one, and let me give you guys the last 2 or 3. One is I create something that creates tension that has nothing to do with the player characters or the creature. I love using a particular environment, something special, woods, underground. That's it.
All great stuff, really great. Jordan, Cody.
Yeah, I try to make encounters like a puzzle in a way, and this could be something and I say puzzle, but that's really the wrong word, but something for the players to figure out. So it could be as easy as if you kill the dire wolf, the rest of the wolves will run away. And so if they can figure out through your storytelling, like you're kind of saying, they're following this lead wolf, this like alpha wolf, and if you take that out, if they figure it out, like if you take that out, then the encounter's over, is something that can be really useful at easy level or lower levels. And then also, I was writing notes that I remember with things, but give the monsters something cool. This could be a crystal that's like a laser. So the goblin in the back has this crystal that shoots laser beams, and he's doing like 3 hex bolts every round. And it's kind of like this environmental thing where at initiative 20, he's going to do this no matter what. And this is also something that the players could take from him and try to utilize themselves, which would make combat a little more interesting. It's really easy to be like, I want to give you a super challenging monster, which is easy, but it's harder to make the characters more intelligent. And I think if you make your monsters a little more intelligent, then it ups the ante of the combat a little bit.
I'll throw in here. So I know this isn't really quite related to the question, but it is kind of my answer to the question, and that's that don't be afraid to make combat your own. So I'm a big 3.5 guy. I was a big Pathfinder guy, and so 5e to me feels a little like you were saying earlier. Tick tack, back and forth. And so I have a few set of homebrew rules that I add back in. I add back in flanking that gives players the motivations to kind of move around and maneuver and do things like that. Standing up is not just a free action that they can just stand up and not take any attacks opportunity. So I think by adding in some of those more tactical rules, you can get some more variance in those combats even at lower levels. So that's one thing that I do to try to mix things up. Also, I'll play one of my favorite encounters that I've ever done, and this can be done at any level, is adding in a puzzle element to it. Not kind of like what Jordan was saying, but like an actual puzzle. So
I was going to bring this up because of a live stream. But...
yeah, you actually, yeah. So I forgot you. That's right. You were. I forgot you were in that game. I apologize. The Tower of Hanoi. I forgot that I put that up on YouTube. So the Tower of Hanoi puzzle. So it's a puzzle. It's a Tower of Hanoi puzzle. You can look it up. It's been around for forever. And while the players are trying to solve this, I have individual rules for that. There are also statues or caskets that are coming alive with undead and vampires or whatever. So you're giving players, you're giving players that are having to solve this puzzle in time before whatever your trigger is. Maybe after X amount of rounds, the big golem comes to life and crushes them. And at the same time, you have these combats that are kind of popping up all over this enormous room. And you could do something like this at any level, and it doesn't have to be just this one puzzle. You could do something like somebody's trying to pick a lock and solve do the right code to get into a thieves guild safe house while goblins are pouring down the street, and people are trying to fight them off. And that kind of goes back into what these guys were saying, where you have an additional objective in addition to just, okay, we're going to hit you with the hammer until you die. And you can do that by overwhelming numbers so that it matters. That way, it's one of those things where it's not like, okay, well, we're tired of this puzzle, we're just going to kill the encounter and just fight out our way out of this alleyway. So anytime you can include a puzzle, an objective, a something that is occupying one or two players, that way it gives them the spotlight. It's a great way to give them the spotlight without stopping your game and being like, okay, here's a puzzle, and then one person answers one person solves it while the other three people sit around and talk about a movie that they saw last week. You can also include them and turn it into a combat encounter as well.
If I could paint a picture for everyone, hopefully everyone has seen the very first Lord of the Rings movie when they go to the Caverns of Mordor, and there's a scene in the movie where they have to go down a set of stairs, of course, without the handrails. And in that scene, there's a element of escalation that you can use if you're not really comfortable adding in like this this triangle of combat where you have the PCs, the enemy, and then this third element, whether it's like a puzzle trap lair kind of thing. Using that as an example, you have a situation where the player characters have a limited amount of space, right? So there's enemies very far away. They're firing javelins or arrows or something, and now you've created a situation where the players have a limited amount of space, and they have to start making checks to jump across the broken steps. And as the combat continues, some of the player characters, the elf, starts shooting some of the bad guys. Maybe the dwarf is not really good with athletics, so it's got to, the halfling has to be helped over the steps, and they start to spread apart. Now it's getting bigger and bigger, and then as the game master, you start talking about the steps crumbling, and guess what? By the way, one of them's actually going to fall over, and you can just start ramping up using your ability as the DM to ramp up the tension if at first it doesn't seem like much of a threat, right? And just to remind you guys, as the DM, you never run out of creatures. right? Don't be upset if your great encounter gets like, hosed in the first round. Don't worry about it. You got more. All right. So if you're worried about like the CRs and stuff, I don't bother looking at CR anymore. Really. I mean, I just kind of like, that's about right. I just eyeball it, and you can always add more elements in there. And so I like the idea of like building tension in a fight, a rope bridge that's starting a fray, mudslide that's about to hit, storm surge about to hit the pier, collapsing ceilings on it underground, a flooded chamber, all those kind of things, because it gives me a tool to manipulate how long or short I want my combat. So I'm kind of giving away how the sausage is made, but like if the players are going to like hose the bad guys, I'll ramp up the danger just a little bit more. And I love adding in a little randomizer, right? So just before combat starts, hey, everybody make a roll. I'll pick a die or something like a D4, D6. And if you roll a 1, you're going to be the target of like the flaming debris of the lava or something, or if you roll a 1, you're going to be the one that's going to get hit by the collapsing ceiling. So that makes people have to rethink their objectives and their tactics and things like that.
Yeah.
I use skill challenges a lot in the middle of combat. So like if combat is okay, they mopped up this encounter really easy. I'm like, now we're gonna have a break. The goblins are fleeing, and we're gonna have a skill challenge for whatever environmental hazard I did. And you did a great example of like having to jump from staircase to staircase. Then depending of that success or fail, they have either an overwhelming amount of goblins that come back, or they easily mop up the rest of them or something like that. And so skill challenges can be a good way of just like, let's just pause right here. Like you guys are clearly winning. Like you're going to mop this up really easy. Now let's just see what's happening now with various environmental hazards that's going on.
Yeah, that's awesome. So let's bring it back around to the goblins. And I wonder, I know that the guys at on the podcast Roll Up and Die, which I'm a big fan of, will sometimes do this kind of round robin creation. So I wonder if we can just start going around and each maybe describe one element, maybe take one of the things we've talked about here that would spice up your goblin combat. And I'm going to start. I'm disobeying the rule. As the host, I'm going to start.
That's always the easiest one.
I really like what someone in the chat said, and I'm gonna let the chat contribute here about giving your monsters characters, making each monster its own character. And so I'm going to say that there is, one goblin, and this goblin actually has it's a little bit more skinny and gangly, but it's long and gangly, and it's got a big metal hook that starts right about here. And that is just something that can give, make one of them, and then maybe you give that goblin 5 more hit points, and then this hook attack does more damage, right? Or something like that. And so that's going to be my just first, just don't make it typical. And maybe there's another one that's, wearing rags and has just a club, and then the other 3 have, short swords or whatever, right? So who wants to take it away next?
I'll do it. So you mentioned the goblin has a hook, so I'm thinking something coastal or aquatic, or maybe even somehow the goblin and its cohorts are they use shallow boats to come on shore and attack villages and things like that. So the goblin has a pouch with like little chunks of like fish or food or something, and he throws them at the party, and some other creature, like, I don't know, giant crabs or something like that, goes after the food and then goes after the party. So wherever he throws the food, the monsters go after it, and then goes after whatever closest player character there is. And there's a little trick to it, because a player character, if they steal the pouch of food, can stop the onslaught of these, like, say, giant crabs that come out of the water and go after the food. They could either throw the food back at the goblin, they could steal the pouch and run for it, they could, take the pouch and throw it within the goblin, like spill it open and spill it within the goblin horde or something like that. So I'll say I'll give him and some of his cohorts little pouches with food, and when they throw them, they little like some kind of aquatic creature or something or coastal creature goes after the food and then goes after a player character.
All right, I'm going to mix things up a little bit because as the players are engaged with these goblins throwing, with this goblin leader with this magnificent hook hand, and he's throwing, he's using the environment and his ability to tame these. I'm going to say that another party shows up here, a third party, because that goblin, he won the right to lead his tribe because he took this hook from the orc Norash, and now Norash has been hunting him down, looking back for his hook and retribution. And as the players are engaged with these goblins, a completely new band of orcs come charging onto the battlefield, neither friend nor foe, or not friends to either of the current parties, and they're going to start throwing javelins from far away and mixing things up with the players. Now the players kind of get caught in a crossfire between these two completely different tribes, all at war, all with their own goals.
Beautiful. You totally stole my idea with the crabs, only I was going to do wolves, but I got another one. So, what if a beach that they're fighting on is there's some kind of lava flow underneath, and it's creating plumes of hot sand that are shooting up on the beach? And I would take a literal sand timer and I would put it in front of my players and I would turn it over. And every time that sand timer went down, a plume would shoot up to the point where they could figure out a pattern. Like I want my players to be able to figure out a pattern to thus not just avoid it, but like, what if we lure a crab over it? Or what if we push some goblins into it and really get that like grapple mechanic, allow them to play around with that. So.
And if I can mess with this a little bit, give a little bit of a DM advice to people who are listening about this idea. One of the things I would look out for in whoever I'm playing with would be the player characters that feel like they don't have the ability to get involved in it. So just like Jordan said, it was about skill challenges. Like I'd allow like arcane skill checks or stealth or sleight of hand or knowledge or
animal handling for the crabs.
Animal handling.
Oh, yeah.
Let those characters shine by being able to figure out a way around it or use and abuse what's going on to help out the rest of the party. Because you're going to have somebody who's going to be swinging for a lot of damage. And the other players who can't do that may feel like they're being left out unless they're like, hey, if I'm the one that can wrangle the wolves or something or the crabs, then it makes them feel empowered. So I would absolutely look at the table and go, the bard feels like he's not really doing much. Make a skill roll to figure out this other thing.
Yeah, yeah, that's great, man. That was man. So now I got to run this. Okay. Oh, that was so cool. Yeah, people.
DBJ's
yeah, it's gonna be in the
next
book.
week.
Yeah.
What will the title be?
I'll be looking for it on DM's Go.
Memoirs of a live stream.
Oh man. Yeah, sand crabs and goblins in the crack. Okay, sorry. So anyway, it's why I hate the beach.
Turning, man.
I always get to my crack. All right. So anyway. Anyway, I'm wondering, Cody, you got a question, and I had a similar question that you told me about that someone in your Twitter feed had mentioned, and unless I'm remembering it correctly, but. Either way, I'm wondering if we can comment on how do you guys keep combat speedy? Because it's easy, depending on your edition especially, it's easy to get bogged down. It's easy to make it just drags on, right? And you got like, yeah, I don't know. And I think we've covered the monotony part of it. That can compound it and make it worse when it's just like hit, miss. But in general, how do you keep things speedy?
Man, here's the thing. I have an answer for this, and it's a very Chris Perkins answer, and it's going to kind of make me seem a little bit like a dick, but I just expect players to stay in the moment. I will not hesitate to be like, you're up next. What are you doing? And I'll like snap and I'll talk at kind of this high voice to try to breathe some energy and just try to like create that just emotion. And I'll tell players like, hey, what are you doing? Be thinking about this. When you get that kind of like, you can pull people in with your voice so much more than you realize. Even if you're not like a big voice actor DM, you can still pull people in, and he comes up and he slashes. What do you do?
Yep.
That's so much different than, all right, Greg, your turn. Like, it's a significant difference. And I'll skip people if they don't have an answer, if they're not thinking. I mean, I'm not going to do this to. I have new players. I have new players, and I'm not going to do that to new players, right? I'm going to, hey, well, you could probably do this or this or this. But if I have people that are experienced, I mean, let's be honest, 5e is not terribly complicated. It's like I will skip an experienced player in a heartbeat and not think twice about it, and I'll come right back to them. But when you do that once or twice in a game, it will change the dynamic of how the players are in the moment during campaigns.
I have to add to Cody, like if your energy is up, you can get everyone else's energy up. It's almost like yelling fire in a crowded, theater kind of thing. So what are you doing? What are you doing? And one of the ways to do that is to summarize what just happened. And then if the players are paying attention, because I'm very theater of the mind, I allow narrative to benefit the players if they use it. So an example would be the players are surrounding a big giant lizard or something, and the previous player just used their spear and stabbed the lizard in the rear quarters. So I'll say, okay, and I'll summarize with one or two lines. Okay, the fighter just stabbed the lizard in the with the spear, and it turns around to go after the fighter. The lizard's head has turned away from you. His back is to you. What do you want to do? Right? If they're paying attention, they can use that to their advantage. Okay, I'm the rogue. I'm going to sneak off because I've just been injured by this thing, or I'm going to cast a web on it so it doesn't, or whatever. I'm going to cast darkness or something like that. And keeping them involved in the combat and having one action build on the other, to me, I think helps players become invested, because if they lose energy and are not invested in what's going on, they can't take advantage of the next action. And so that's what I usually do. I usually stack everything. When one player character does something, I let everybody know what they did. Okay, the wizard just cast a huge fireball, and the curtains are on fire, and the goblins are running for it. What do you do? And somebody says, well, I'm going to stop them at the door. Great, you block the door, and they stop there, and they're just like looking in awe, like, oh no, we're going to get killed, blah, blah, blah. And I just keep the energy going. And then all right, cleric, what are you going to do? And I summarize, the place is on fire. The fighter just stood in front of the door, blah, blah, blah. Just keep the energy up, because if you lower it down, their energy is going to drop down as well.
Yeah, I do. It sounds simple because it is simple, but I do hey, you're on deck. And so, Jim Bob, it's your turn. Sally, you're on deck. And that has something that's helped my group a lot, because I have players that like crochet at the table. Like my wife, I love her to death, but D&D is not her thing. She totally plays because she loves me. But she'll sit and crochet at the table. So I do a lot of like, you're on deck, like, please have something ready after this person's turn. And then she's like, oh, you're right. Like, I got to put this down and I got to like focus and stuff. Because for her, there were so many times where she's like, well, I know what I want to do, but then the map changed so much during the course of someone's turn that she's like, well, I don't know what to do anymore. So another tactic that I use, and this is not for every player, but like specifically, and I can talk about my wife, so she's not going to hate me for this, but specifically for her, I'll ask, what do you want to do? Because a lot of times she doesn't know, or some of my players don't know the rules as well as I do. And so we were fighting a giant mechanical golem recently. And she's just like, well, it's made of metal. I don't feel like I can touch. And she got all flustered. And I'm like, well, what do you want to do? She's like, I want to trip it. I'm like, well, you have rope and you've got a dog companion. Like, do you want to do I have to spell out Star Wars for you? And she's like, oh my God, Star Wars. And like, so they ran, you know, the dog took the rope in his mouth and ran it around the thing's feet. We did a simple check to see if it fell, and it fell, and everybody got advantage on it. And it was like, oh, this is awesome. So just asking like, well, what do you want to do when people get flustered and they don't know, like, I don't know what to do, rather than like listing and then they might not know even then, but like I find asking what they want to do or giving at least 2 options, not 5, not 6, like 2 simple options. Like you can A or you can B, like which is it going to be? So
I've got one more point I want to jump in here, and it's kind of related to combat and keeping it exciting, in that I am like a firm believer in the short D&D session. Like I am a huge believer in the short D&D session. I play too much D&D to see 4-hour sessions get to the point where it's like, okay, and then what happens? And like, you know, everybody's kind of like exhausted and tired. I love the short D&D session. We play like 2.5 hours, 2 hours, 15 minutes, you know, so somewhere in that period. And I think a lot of times one trick that I do, like a dirty little trick, is I show people the big bad, and then I end the session. And it's like a good way, because I do like to have combat early, and then the story cliffhanger, you know, by the end of the session, the development of what's going on in the story later on in the session. So, I mean, it's kind of related to keeping combat exciting, but that's just something that I love to do, is to show people, hey, we got a combat, and it's been a short session, and always leave them kind of wanting more, so that when they show up for combat, the next week, they're ready. We're jumping into it, roll initiative, and we're, you know, you have the energy as a DM, like DBJ said, to, you know, get up and be excited and do all those things with your
I'm
players.
with you, especially if you're gaming once a week. Like, I think, you know, I understand if you're only gaming once a month and you really want to, you know, get a big session in. Yeah, but I think lots of great points made. One thing that just speeds it up for me, and this is kind of related to some of what you guys were talking, is just the little initiative tents that I have on my DM screen. And I have one of my players who's sitting near me, usually in charge of moving those. And that way it takes a little thing off my plate, and it's just like they can see who's up next very visually. Another thing I think that was mentioned in the chat is from Questing Beast, who's, if you guys don't know Questing Beast, go subscribe to his channel. He's awesome. Ben is awesome.
Yes,
yeah.
please do.
And Ben, I got to get you in on one of these too, because he's got a lot of great ideas here.
Because he's here.
But
he's
the idea of showing players the AC, I mean, it depends how, you know, that's not going to be for everybody. Some people really like to, you know, not even say what it is, and like you just see they describe the creature, and maybe you guys wouldn't even know what this is, and for everything. I do that for some things, but it kind of depends how meta you want to get. But for me, I don't mind telling my players the AC. I know that in Index Card RPG, which someone mentioned earlier too, it's like every room has a DC, and like anything you want to do in this room has this DC, and there's sacrifices to be made in that style of play, because now you get less nuance, and like, well, I'm really good at this one thing, but the DC is the same for all these things in this room, you know. So but the idea is that speeds things up a lot, and Hankerin, if you don't know him, he favors really just keep it popping, man, and really, really quick, and that's Index Card RPG. So I think that you can give bits of information like that, and it can really speed things up.
Well, and speaking of giving information to the players, like let them track the damage they're doing. That's something I haven't tried yet, where you're not telling them the HP, but every periodically you're just like, well, how much damage have you guys actually like pumped into this monster? And they're like, oh, that goblin, he's taken 17 damage. I'm like, okay, good. He's not looking too good. Let's continue. You know, Sally, you're up again. So, but something I've been wanting to try is have my players actually, and I've got one I think that would love it, and the rest of them want to crochet or do play on their phones or something like that. But I make it sound like I have the worst group. I really don't. I love my group. I should reemphasize that.
I mean, yeah, that's like a whole nother conversation. I didn't mean to cut you off, G, but I'm sorry.
Nope,
it's like a, you know, that's a whole nother conversation to have, is like rolling behind the screen and rolling, you know, and fudging and all that stuff. That's like a whole nother topic. But, you know, if you like, I don't, you know, my home group, I have no DM screen anymore. It's just, and I roll right out there. So when people fail saves on a player casting hold monster, it speeds up combat because I'm not fudging, I'm not fudging, behind the screen. Oh, the monster saves. Like I'm just letting it happen, and I think that kind of deters the discouragement of that kind of mystery behind the screen in combat. Oh, I tried my spell 3 times and they always fail. I don't really care, whatever. That's just a personal kind of note that I wanted to add that I think has had a very positive effect on my games.
I sometimes just because a theater of the mind guy, and I like the story to revolve around the players. I have to say that I don't take every encounter. I don't place the same importance on every encounter. So the AC, the damage done, the hit points, and all that kind of stuff. Do I hand wave some of those things if it's a minor encounter with some bandits on the road, because really the actual plot is to get to the caves of chaos or something? I'm going to hand wave a lot of that stuff. And when I say hand wave, it's not that I'm choosing to decide how it turns out, but if a player rolls an 18 to hit on something, I'll let him roll damage, but in effect, I'm just going, whatever. He kills the guy. I'm not counting hit points. I'm not doing all that for very minor events. Now, when it comes to the big bad, because then all that energy I like to save up for the big bad, where I let the players, kind of micromanage their abilities and things, and let them be the professionals that they are, the experts in fighting or magic or psionics or whatever have you. But for like minor little interactions or something, great, you stab the wolf, he runs. I'm not going into the detail about a lot of those things because I don't have much time. So time is a commodity. It's very precious for a lot of people, especially us content creators. So you got to move things along, and for the most part, I don't track all that stuff. Not for very minor encounters.
Something at our table is we only super describe critical hits or critical misses to speed along combat. So a lot of it is just like, well, if you scored a 20, how did you maim this guy? Because clearly you've done like a lot of stuff, and it gets really interesting where people are like losing limbs and things like that. I haven't turned that on my players yet, but it's something I've been thinking about doing, where I'm like, it might make it a little more real for them to lose an arm or a finger.
Yeah, and I think that gets into the idea of role playing too. That I know some groups will describe every little action in combat in great detail, and that can be cool, and that's a totally fine style, and I happen to enjoy that style quite a bit. But some groups don't describe anything, and so I think that I've heard a lot of DMs who want their players to role play more, and I think one easy way to do that is to say, what does this look like as you do like 22 damage? Jeez, and describe that to me, and or this is the first time you cast this spell. What does this look like? Things like that can really, we're off topic in terms of speeding things up, but can spice combat up for sure. Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say that I think one of the, I don't want to say problems, there's a habit that some of us fall into is the minute initiative is rolled, the role playing stops. And so it's not really a rule, but it's more like if you describe anything, you can just make basically one line of dialogue or description or whatever between every roll, right? So I'll say, like, I'll speak for the orc or something that sees the goblin, is throwing food at this adventuring party, and the orc's on the hill, and the orc will make some big announcement in Orcish about, I am Garthak or something, and I'm here to kill you, evil goblin. And then I'll roll I'll roll the hit. And then I'll let the player character describe something, and then I'll describe what the hit is. Okay, the javelin just barely misses you and pings off of your shield. Okay, and then keep going, and then even I'll add in dialogue in there too. If the creature can talk, I'll have it talk back to them in between the die rolls. And it sounds like it's slowing combat, but because I'm mainly a theater of the mind person, it's essentially what happens is instead of people rolling to see what happens, they are telling me what objective they're looking for. Like you guys were saying about, I want to trip the golem, right? Sometimes if a person just says, I'm going to roll to hit, you're not getting what their objective is.
Mm-hmm.
You know, is the objective you want to knock the person out? Is your objective to push them off of the bridge? Is your objective to disarm them or something? And so instead of, because then if I find that out, then I'm like, well, you don't need to roll damage. Just make a strength check. Boom. Oh, you got it. Okay, falls over. So now I've gotten past the hoopla. If you're a wizard or something, I'm like, well, what are you trying to do? And they're like, well, I want to light the rope bridge on fire. I'm like, oh, okay, that's what you're trying. Fine. Okay, make a roll. Spell check roll. Oh, great. You did it. And so for me, that's kind of how I maneuver around people thinking about their character sheets, because they kind of get top-headed. Where a person looks down at their character sheet and all you can see is the top of their head. It's like, no, look up, tell me what you want to do, and we can figure it out from there. And it's not really about throwing the rules away, because I think some people think if you're playing theater to mind, you're not using the rules. Really, it's just using the engine, which is a D20, you've got stats, you've got skill checks, you've got saves. You can pretty much solve 95% of any problem using a D20 and those three things.
Yeah, I've had definitely the players, and I think I was this way when I first started playing too. I'm looking down at my character sheet trying to figure out which ability haven't I used yet, and is this okay? I can, and I think that's natural when you're new, but I think really trying to
We treat it like a video game, and a lot of our
right,
role players
totally.
do that,
Like, where's my I got my cooldown bar down here, and I can hit 7 and do this thing. So yeah, I think that you know, there has to be a balance. Like, you know, I've had new players where they like, you know, our paladin has lay on hands, and he like doesn't. He's never used this, and this really would have come in handy. So there are times I'm like, hey, you got some things, don't forget about these. But I find more often is the opposite problem of just, yeah, tell me what you want to do. And I think you as the DM then have to reward the players for thinking creatively, and don't just like, oh, okay, you do this instead. Melee damage is, okay, 1 damage, great. And it's like, now you've just punished them for like thinking creatively and doing this thing. Like, how can you also reward them? New question, guys. DBJ, you brought this up. And I feel like you guys have too, a little bit here and there. And the idea of objectives, you just brought this up about like, well, maybe your objective is not just to kill, right? And someone mentioned it earlier too. So let's think of some other examples of objectives in combat other than we are in a dungeon and we encounter a monster or a group of monsters, or we kick down the door and what's in the room? Monsters, of course. And so what are some other objectives that we can rattle off here?
I mean, I think the easiest ones is the protector, right? The guardian. I mean, has anybody played Morrowind before? All right, and they had an NPC drown because you didn't take the right path. Yeah, you know, the protector. We're trying to protect the kid from the horde. It's not just us fighting off this endless swarm, but rather us getting this kid to the top of the bell tower so we can swing across, so we can get to safety. You know, anytime that you have to protect another NPC and not just casually discard, oh, there's an NPC, they rolled it in attack, they didn't do anything. But, you know, that could be a really, really interesting objective for players and kind of flip combat on its head a little bit.
Something I've used recently is bypassing a creature. So there's a door that's like slowly going down, and every round it keeps getting lower and lower, like Indiana Jones style. They have to dive under it. What is the point of what is the point of fighting it, but like at what point do you stop fighting this monster to then run? And what tricks does he have to keep you from running? Like, that's a really good scenario with a roper that can send out its tendrils and pull you back in. So it can be really fun.
Yeah, I love both of those. Essentially, you know, like getting from A to B is a great great thing that you said, Jordan, about you know, getting past a creature that's chained, you know, in front of the cave entrance or something, and you have to fight past it to get through it, or navigating across a narrow ledge that's, you know, there's like lava or boiling acid underneath, and you have to, you know, maneuver your way across a narrow ledge to get to the other side. I love those things because it creates that in the IC RPG where you have this counter, this timer that's going down, and even though you may have players who are very good at combat, that may not be what's needed in that particular situation. So yeah, I love tension generators. Anything that creates pressure, that pushes people forward.
Yeah, I
love
think
those.
one of my favorite notions is like someone mentioned chase earlier, and I love a good chase. I've not run very many successful chases. I think like if I actually like followed some of the chase rules in the DMG, I'd be better off than some of the ways I've done it. And but something is stolen from the PCs or from a village, and the players have the opportunity to chase and there's so much room for environmental craziness in that too, and they can just be a lot of fun.
And don't forget competition. Competition is I mean, a couple of different scenes. It's like, okay, so you got the dudes on the ledge. Their goblins are chasing up after them down the mountainside, and across the ravine, the players can see, their competitor party who's also dealing with orcs on that side, and they're racing to try to get to the first one to the jade statuette or whatever at the top. Or if your players are in a gladiator arena, and the way that they win the round is the first one to capture the flag, think like WWE ladder match or something, whatever. There's combat going on, but there is that kind of race against another party where you have that competitor that also poses a completely separate threat of falling off the ledge or getting filled with arrows from the goblin.
Now, this isn't a plug, but this is kind of like my self-appointed specialty. Okay, all right. I absolutely love using the environment, man-made or natural, and it is the secret tool for so I'm telling you guys, only you guys, don't spread it around, that it is the special sauce that you can use everywhere, and here's why. First of all, when you use the environment, very rarely do you have to come up with some elaborate reason why the environment is the way it is. So, for example, there's heavy fog. You don't need to look up like the fog cloud spell and explain that it covers 3 miles of fog, right? In reality, there is fog. Having a wizard who can cast a 3-mile wide fog cloud might be a little hard for your players to accept. But in reality, if there's just natural fog, then you can have that. Same thing with like avalanches and waterfalls and thick jungles and things. The environment is narratively free, and you can use that. And it's useful to add limitations on some players and allow others to shine. So, for example, in an open desert, maybe the player characters who have the longer ranged attacks can shine, but then in a thick jungle, the ones who have the longer ranges may not be able to use those because it's being intercepted by, say, the foliage or that kind of thing. So I love adding, I don't want to say limitations, and I know there's the nasty word nerfing, but I love adding hindrances to some so that others can shine. And then when you start switching it back and forth, depending on the environment, it's a great way to, change up the barbarian who's like, pumping out 120 points of damage. You can't really do damage to the environment, so now you got to think outside the box. So that's why I love using it.
You can't really do damage to the environment. That is key. I love that. I just put a link to some of DBJ's stuff in the chat too, so go check that out. And yes, that is an affiliate link because I'm a shill. But no, great stuff.
I love letting other players shine. Specifically, lately in my games, I have a fighter and a monk who seem to be taking charge of most situations. Like we fought a giant purple worm, and it was like stunning strike, attack, and like climbing on its back and putting swords in it. And they were doing awesome stuff. Whereas my poor ranger was like, I shoot my bow. And the cleric was like, I heal you. And we were like, okay, cool. So I wanted to create an encounter where the cleric and the ranger could be like the coolest of the cool in this situation. And so I decided to have literally like 400 1 hit point zombies come up out of the sand and walk towards where they were sleeping. So they wake up to the sounds of like thousands of groaning and moaning and stuff like that. And it was really fun encounter because I took a jar of pennies that I have and I just dumped pennies out onto the table. And I'm like, each of these is a 1 hit point zombie. Like you have to, we've got $4 worth of pennies. You guys need to figure out what you're doing. And to the credit, like my monk and my fighter, they jumped out and they're just like, well, I slash and I do 22 damage. I'm like, great, you took out 1 zombie. What are you going to do now? And they're like, and so they were kind of like, this is fun, but not really fun. But my ranger was able to use all of her environmental stuff where she can make the ground difficult terrain. She can cast arrows that like splinter off into like a dozen other arrows that hurt over here. The cleric was so excited to use Turn Undead, and she wanted to maximize her efforts. So she climbed on top of I think we had like a giant ant that they were using as a mount. And she rode that ant through a whole bunch of opportunity attacks to get to the very center where she would do the most damage with her Turn Undead to just obliterate like a huge circle of zombies. And so it was really fun to like let them shine in an encounter finally, because my fighter and monk just kind of dominate with stunning strike and various other things.
Yeah, that's great.
That's awesome.
Yeah, some good ideas for sure. So question for you guys, 2 kind of common questions when people are dealing with combat. We kind of touched on one, balance. Balanced encounters. How do you manage that? Do you get, I mean, I get the feeling that I don't use CR that much. I use it as a general guide. Because it can be useful for, anyway. But do you guys use some of these XP budget stuff? How do you do this? Go.
Uh-oh. Okay.
We're all thinking the same
Okay. Here's the deal. I don't use CR, and I would rather have a very cool motivation for one or more of the creatures. So let me give you an example. There's 5 ogres, and let's say the party cannot handle fighting 5 ogres. Let's say they're really low level. I wanted to throw in 5 ogres. They meet 5 ogres, and then they're just like, oh, you know what? I really shouldn't have done that. I'm thinking this in my head, right? The thing is that I don't let the players know that I screwed up. What I do is I have a motivation for the ogres. So maybe instead one of the ogres steps forward and cracks his knuckles and is just like, I've got this, guys. You step back while I crush some heads or something, allowing me the narrative control to say, hey, I'm going to have them fight 1 ogre. The other 4 are going to sit back and let this guy take care of it and then see what happens. And if they start trashing the ogre, and I'm like, oh, whoa, I didn't realize they were going to trash the one. Okay, then 2 of his friends get involved in it. And so it's just using the narrative space to say, there's a reason why these creatures are acting either extremely lethal or not lethal because they're involved in doing some other things. I think one point I used a troll or something, and the troll was an agent of this faction of like assassins or something. Anyway, the troll grabs the wizard and smacks the wizard around, knock the wizard down a bunch of hit points. And I had the troll take his action to spit in the wizard's face and threaten him and like, you're coming with me and there's nothing you can do, blah, 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 blah. And then the player character was able to kind of like respond to the threats and stuff and had the opportunity to take an action when normally I could have just been like, okay, roll, you're dead, next character, because literally it was the opening of the game, right? They spent all this time making their characters. First attack, boom, it was like 20, bam, 20, bam. And I was like, oh man, they spent all this time, they're going to sit around for 2 hours? I'm not going to have that happen. So I like to use narrative control.
Okay, my little tidbit would be, it's really tough because if you are a DM that is really focused on, if you're having a lot of combat and you know that you are able to get that sort of, these are, my players are going to have 4, 5, 6 combats before they're going to rest, then CR kind of matters. if you are running 1 combat, 2 combats, 3 combats an entire session, players are resting in between these sometimes, stuff like that, then I think you can kind of throw CR out the window. I will tell you this. The one piece of advice I have for DMs when it comes to balancing an encounter, and the most common mistake I see, is you have to take action economy into consideration. I have seen a lot of people go, my party is level 5, this is a CR5 monster, why did they trounce it? Oh, I used a CR8 monster on my level 5 party. That's because it's one monster. And so, unless you're putting them up against like a CR8 Hydra, which is, okay, cool. That's kind of interesting. But the one big monster almost always will be handily defeated by your party, because if you got casters and stuff, they're gonna bend the rules of physics and law and damage and stuff, and it's gonna be very easy for them to trounce that. So action economy matters so much. And looking at an encounter like Saber Dice this week, I put the guys up against 2 CR5s. They're level 5. I was like, here's 2 CR5 trolls, and you know what? Halfway through, we're gonna have a Shambling Mound, which is another CR5. And I kind of had the Shambling Mound attack the troll one time, and then I had somebody else kind of come in, an NPC come in, towards the end of combat. But dude, they were handling that combat easily. And so don't be afraid to look at action economy and value that much higher than challenge ratings, especially if you are using 1 or 2 monsters. So look at action economy. That's a big thing that it's kind of just the eyeball test, and I wish I had a better way to teach it, but it's really just, they don't have enough attacks for the players. 1 hold monster and this is over. 1 confusion spell DC and this combat's irrelevant. So action economy. Put more mobs.
And I've had
there.
the opposite problem.
I've got some simple fixes for that, but let Jordan answer.
Oh no, I guess I'm gonna play a little bit by the rules. CR math is not fun, and I don't think it's a good system for judging monsters and encounters. And you will figure this out just by running games. But early levels, I really stuck to the CR math, and I feel like that helped levels 1 to 4 a lot. Just for me to know as a brand new dungeon master to 5th edition, like, I don't know if I can throw this monster at them, and I don't know how much this is going to do. And I did have to pull punches a couple times behind my screen, because I'm like, I will destroy all of these guys, and I didn't think about that. So levels 1 to 4, I really think that CR math is like, it holds up. My players are level 10 now, and I throw deadly encounters at them over and over again, because I can't challenge them anymore. Like, if I give them medium to hard encounters, they don't get hurt. And if they don't get hurt, they don't spend hit dice. And that's the whole point of the game, is to, well, not the whole point of the game, but like,
it's on record, we heard it.
Yeah. Hit point wise, you want to whittle down their resources. And I guess I will piggyback off of what Cody said, like, action economy and just playing the game, you'll figure it out. You'll be like, you know what? I really want to throw a Medusa at my party, but I'm looking at Medusa and I'm looking at how many attacks this thing gets. And it's like, I'm going to have some kind of animated statues to back her up, because there's just not enough going on. Or I'm going to have an environmental hazard that does something. Like I've done to the extremes of, like, you know what, healing magic is half effective in this zone. And so you can throw this like weaker monster at it as long as they can't get up from healing word every other round or something like that. Yeah. So
I'll give you guys a couple of the people that are watching, a couple of fixes. One of them is the absolute best tool in the DM's toolkit is reskin.
Yeah.
Take a bunch of creatures, and if you just want one big bad, reskin creatures as the powers of the bad guy. So
love it.
If you want a wizard who's like has telekinetic abilities, throw a bunch of invisible stalkers. Those are just they're acting as the telekinetic force of the creature. If you have a wizard that's casting spells, just make them fire elementals. They don't look like that, but that's what they are. Throw a bunch of will-o-wisps because they're shooting out, what are essentially like magic eldritch blasts or something like that, but make them creatures to stack up the action economy. So you have yes, you can add minions in there, but you can also reskin the powers of the creature that they're fighting. So, for example, you have an Etna, two-headed giant or something, and it's fighting the bad guy. I mean, fighting the player characters. But you can have him stomp his foot or smash against the wall, and then you have your reskinned collapsing ceiling or pit traps or what's the rolling ball trap, you know, from whatever. You can reskin a ton of things as environmental things that happen to happen during the combat to confound your player characters. And writing a couple of bullet points is just a really good way of doing it. So if you have like a vampire, maybe there's the vampire has the ability to summon ghosts or something like that, or the vampire has the power to, you know, shoot at an eldritch hand that can grasp people. And you just pick a creature in the book and go, you know what, it's going to be this one, and make it look like a spell or a power. But yeah, that's a good way of ramping it up the action economy to match how many player characters.
Yeah, that's great. I think
there's something to add to that too as well. Sorry.
I'll add a couple final thoughts on that, and then I want to get to last question, which Cody just proposed, and I kind of had the idea of doing this too, and I wasn't thinking we would get to it, but I think we have to. Cody threw it out there, and we're gonna do it, and that is just describing one memorable combat encounter for each of us. So you guys can be thinking about that. But and maybe we've already done that. That's fine. But I will just say I think that reskinning is great, and I often will say if there's a really cool monster, like I know my brother really likes werewolves and he's really into monster movies, and I just wanted to like have one of these creatures in there. So I just totally nerfed it, I guess is a better way to say it, or I made it like a vampire spawn instead, right? I will also say that I've played with DMs and I have done this before. Where and this is exact words from one of my friends, monsters die when they are supposed to die. Hit points, you know, and that's one way to balance it. It's like, this combat has gone long enough. The monster's going to die now. That's controversial.
I'll write in my notes a lot. This guy should survive 3 rounds.
It's controversial, and it's kind of in there with fudge and die rolls a little bit. It's in that realm a little bit, but I'm okay with that sometimes. And I know DBJ, you mentioned with like the minions, like, you know, the bandits, like sure. But I've even done this with the big bad before, where it's like it can get a little dangerous because then you're sometimes deciding whether or not there's going to be a TPK, and I think it's better to let the dice decide, right?
I think it's a good way to add on to that. If you are going to do that, I would consider probably doing that when it's like the combat's leaning this way, and at this point it's a battle of attrition, and you kind of know, hey, they're going to get a full rest after this, and so yeah, they're probably going to win. I doubt somebody's actually going to go down, you know, and lose a character. Then at that point, it's just dragging on. Yeah, like. You can jump all over that. That's just good DMing and understanding the table. Yeah, I think so.
Also, I think hit points aren't the only resource, in my opinion, that the game master should be dwindling. There are you have bonus actions, movement rates, loss of ability scores like losses of strength and constitution, exhaustion,
attack damage,
a ton of conditions. Yes, if you spread out the danger of having resources drained from the player characters by getting into the encounter, whether it's through exhaustion or unconsciousness or being restrained or grappled, those kind of things, then hit points doesn't become the only way of measuring success in the encounter. So for example, you can even use spell slots and things. So if you have a room, as was mentioned before, you could have a room where if they are in the room, like healing is half, or every time a spell is cast, it drains 1 additional spell slot. Or if you're in a room, you need to make, it's so cold, you need to make a constitution save or suffer one level of exhaustion, or when the creature attacks with this special weapon or something, you'll lose like 1d4 constitution damage, or and then then you start stacking that on with the environment. It's foggy, it's the floor is slick, it's there's torrential rain, those kind of things. Like torrential rain might have the distance and damage of fire. Fog, you have disadvantage on ranged attacks. When it's slippery, if you get hit, you need to make a dex check or you fall prone. You can come up with so many things you stack on top of each other that when the players go to fight the big bad, they have a ton of things that they have to deal with and spend their, bonus actions on or something. Hey, you want to cross the rope bridge and you don't want to keep making saves, you got to spend your bonus action to hold on. You're spending part of your attention to keep yourself safe. If you want to spend that bonus action on something else, well, you're going to have to start making saves before you fall. And I like putting the danger in the player's hand. So I stay away from the, if you're here, you suffer this. I prefer if you choose A, this is what happens, or you can choose B and this other thing happens. I usually like to just put it in the player's hands and let them, hurt themselves.
Yeah, that's great. I want to get to this final question before we leave. What is a memorable combat encounter that you have run recently, or not recently? Anyone want to start us off? Otherwise, I'm willing to as well. But okay, sure.
Why don't you go for it, Nate?
I'll go first. So this was probably about 2 months ago. I ran a really fun one. There was a town square. A celebration was over one of the PC's recent victories was happening, and it started raining. And this is kind of what DBJ was talking about. You get the little foreshadowing there. It starts raining a little bit, and someone comes riding in and draws attention, and an alarm is raising the alarm that there are some undead that are on their way. And there's been undead is kind of one of the central themes here. So there's some undead that are on the way. So the PCs have some time to get set up defenses. And that I didn't have any ideas. This is one of the things that I've been talking about a lot with Matt and Matt Click and Tim Carney and some of the other guys in my friend group, and just the idea of prepping problems, not solutions, and just saying, here's a problem. I don't know, figure it out, right? So they were creative and came up with some defenses and stacked some stuff and knocked down a tree and whatever, right? Then there was also, on top of this, a lightning storm that happened, and every round I would do lightning damage. I would first roll to see, I can't remember what I did. I think it was a D100, and I had some way of figuring out if anyone was struck by lightning. And then so they were trying to get lower, and not, at first they started on the rooftops because they were like, this is easily defensible, but then the lightning happened, and so they're going all over. Zombies are coming, and then on top of it all, a black dragon, which they have seen off in the distance. This is one of these main central themes of the campaign as well. Started swooping through occasionally. So they're dealing with lightning, they're dealing with a black dragon, and they're dealing with these defenses with the zombies trying to break through. And it was just awesome. It was so fun. They loved it, and I loved it. So
that's awesome. I got one that Jordan has actually been party to. And it was one that my brother originally ran, and then I kind of was like, yoink, I'm going to take this. And it kind of ties back into the action economy thing that I was talking about. So he set up these hags, this hag coven, and the way that he set it up was that we went to fight them. That, he's just setting the scene, right? There's some cauldron, there's these little skulls with candles out, there's some this. He just set the scene for the whole thing. And so, we didn't really think anything about it. And the way we were level 10 at the time. So, a hag coven, we're level 10, it's close, but, we got a lot of hit points compared to the cool things they can do. And I think that was what made this encounter so cool, was that he took a monster that could do a lot of really cool things, but just couldn't stay in the fight. And so what happened is, after we killed the first hag, and dude, don't get me wrong, it was tough. We're casting silence, they're throwing spells, they're doing legendary actions because we're in their coven. It was awesome. And when we finally dropped the first one, we turned to go to the next hag, and the hag creepily raises back up, and one of the candles goes and goes out. So he had created, and I stole this, Jordan. You
Mhm.
were a party to this for the Mummy Hags that I created
Yeah.
for our charity game that we did. And but with you guys, I gave you foreshadowing. Y'all knew what was going on with the candles, but we didn't, and it was a fantastic encounter. It's one that I look very, very fondly of, and it was really, really creative. And then suddenly, instead of like, okay, cool, we're here, this is the big boss fight, kill them until they're dead, and yeah, it didn't work like that even a little bit. And now we had this new objective halfway through the fight, which I thought was really interesting, is that we didn't understand the objective in the combat until we were already halfway through it. And so we kind of went from this like, okay, cool, we're holding our own, we're doing okay, we got, to, oh my god, there are like, what are we, like, we're in big trouble right now. So very, very, very cool encounter. 3 hags in a coven with multiple candles set out to kind of give them extra lives through whatever souls or whatever. Great fight, really interesting battle when you filled their hit bars up pretty significantly.
I think my Penny Zombies is the one that comes to mind of like that's recent that I had a lot of fun with. But here is an encounter that I'm working on. So I'm working on a big bad evil guy that is at the bottom of this inverted pyramid dungeon. And if you are my players, you probably should stop listening right now, but I'm pretty sure they're not. But he's going to be he's going to have sand magic. And so I'm kind of creating this like type of magic because they're in the desert. And so he's going to have basically an air elemental that can't be damaged. And it's going to be this swirling vortex that he can hide behind and use it for cover or send it out and do damage. And they need to figure out, maybe through magics, but maybe through just like kiting it around. I'm not really sure. Like, I don't have answers yet, but that's kind of what makes encounters really fun, is when you don't have answers, your players come up with the best answers. And then also on top of that, I wanted to have some kind of like Confundus charm device that changes their stats. So they'll roll some kind of a save, and then their strength and their wisdom are swapped for a round. But suddenly the things that they're really good at, they're not good at anymore. And they have to figure out ways of using other skills creatively that they are now good at. Like if their wisdom's really high, all of a sudden it's like, well, I'm really good at nature, but I'm not good at hitting things anymore. I'm like, well, how can you use nature? And so that's kind of I don't know. I want it to be memorable. So I'm trying to think of cool, interesting, memorable things to get it going, but it's still a work in progress.
Very cool.
I love it, man.
Yeah.
I love the sand thing. That's going to be...
Let's see. Wow. All right.
That's a difficult question.
Well, there's a number of really small ones. One encounter was it was completely unexpected. Players go into a castle. I had harpies attack them. They asked me about the double portcullis that a castle sometimes have with the 2 falling grates, and I just happened to say yes. And then they were like, well, we're going to go inside and then time it for the harpies to follow us in and then sneak at, and trap the harpies in one side or the other of the grates. And that was a really good one, because it made me think outside the box, because they challenged me because I hadn't thought about it. So I really liked that one. And let's see, another one was I had nothing for a game. So I just had hordes of goblins attack the player characters in the field. And then the dead bodies were starting to pile up, and the dead bodies and the attackings became its own hazard. So they had to climb up the pile of bodies because they were starting to slip down like King of the Hill kind of thing. And the grass was starting to get soaked. So like they were like, ankle deep in like, bloody mud and whatnot. And they had to fight against exhaustion. And it was one of these encounters where I had nothing. Players wanted to play. I was a DM. I had nothing. And I was like, whatever, you're attacked by a horde of goblins. And then the dice log, after 3 rounds, it was just like, it was completely boring. Like, oh my God, I can't, how do I extricate myself out of this thing? And I just started making it cooler where like the goblins were like crabs. So the player characters like stab the goblins, but then the healthier ones would try to climb over the ones that were hurt and like pushing their heads down and such. And so the goblins that were half hurt were reaching their hands up and trying to grab the player character's legs and pull them down. And then they were fighting into the night. The sun started going down and stuff. And that was really fun because everyone just got into it because it was kind of ridiculous in a way. But I don't remember how many hundreds of goblins they killed, but it was like one of these, like, it was like 300, man. It was just mountains and mountains and mountains of goblins, round after round. And eventually they just became like hit point blocks. And then they would use them as like cover, and like they push a stack of dead goblin bodies to try to pile on the other goblins that were, rushing in again. It was really fun. So, and that was one of a number of things. I used to do a lot of superhero role playing, and I had to end up using the environment a lot. So that just became like my go-to. So that I have to say that.
Are you a fan of Game of Thrones at all?
Yeah. Oh, hell yeah.
That Battle of the Bastards.
Oh my God.
What you're giving me right here.
Yeah.
Except goblins.
That's like a warm blanket around me. I could just turn that on and watch it over and over and over again. The Battle of the Bastards is great just because they took what essentially could just be a very boring, hey, we're on a field, we're just going to fight each other, into this massive, chaos. That first scene where you see the horses and the spears and everything coming by. Yeah,
Yeah, no spoilers, but it's one of the few scenes I think done cinematic that it's like, this is a very, very impressive in a good way to tell a potentially boring story. So yeah, you can reskin the traps and layers and stuff and just make it a battlefield, right? It's not a collapsing ceiling. It's those are catapult shots coming from above, man. Or it's not take something like, I don't know, like a manticore or whatever, but it's not really a manticore. Those are just like, arrow shots coming overhead, or maybe there's like wizards, or flyers flying overhead the battlefield, and you'd have people making skill checks and things to like dodge the arrows that are blotting out the sun as they arch over or something. Yeah, you can. Yeah,
Don't be.
Sorry. I'm already like I've got like 20 different games in my head right now just from the conversation.
You're such a dungeon master.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep myself under control.
I can't wait to write the goblin with the hook throwing food to crabs and with the beach exploding in lava. That'll be in the game.
Let's all get back together sometime and tell how that went. Oh man. Well, this has been awesome, guys. I want to thank you so much for hanging out and chatting. Before we go, I want to thank everyone in the chat, first of all, for joining, for interacting, giving great comments, and your ideas have been amazing, and also giving us some good questions. And I want to give my guests an opportunity just to maybe give a plug for something. I know you guys got your YouTube channels. Everyone, definitely make sure you're subscribed. Check out the links in the video description. But if you wanted to give a plug or two for anything else, feel free to do that now as well. Why don't we start this time with DBJ?
Sure. Okay. Plugs. All right. Go to Drive-Thru RPG and search for Critical Hit Publishing. You can also search specifically for cinematic environs. We have 7 books so far. Arctic Reaches, Aquatic Depths, Blasted Lands, which is like a volcano/hellscape. We've got mountains and such. We're going to do all of the natural environments, and then they will be combined into a compendium for sale. They are PDF and dead tree form, so you can get them print on demand if you wish. Also, we have coming up at Critical Hit Publishing adventure keys, which they're going to start arriving like every 2 weeks. They're only going to be 3 or 4 pages. They're going to be like micro adventures, and each portion of the adventure will have 3 options, so it could be used multiple times. So you have like an NPC and a location and some adversaries and some environmental effects, and you can just kind of mix and match them as you want. And I have a YouTube channel. You won't find it typing in DBJ. You will find it typing in Dave Brian Jackson, or getting to it through the other methods of the cinematic environments, where there's a link down below. I do a live stream for about a half an hour-ish, Monday through Friday, and each day, it's Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So most of you will not be up, but I do it anyway because I'm an idiot. And each day is a different theme. So like Monster Monday, Tips and Tricks Tuesday, World Building Wednesday, my favorite, which is Third Pillar Thursdays, and then Eclipse Phase Friday because I love science fiction. So,
awesome. Good stuff. Good stuff.
Cool, man,
Cody.
I get it.
Oh, am I muted? I was muted. No, I said good stuff, and then I said Cody.
Okay, well, hey, all right, so Cody, you taking 20, of course, I've got YouTube. Go check out our Saber Dice game. We have it every Wednesday, and so, yeah, go check that out. We've got all of our live plays up from our past 4 seasons, so if you want to just watch through the catalog, again, we keep the games kind of 2.5 hours or so a little bit easier to watch, and, you know, it's a lot of joking around and a lot of fun. I think we kind of feel like it's a good mix between Ack Inc. and Crit Roll if you're kind of into those 2 different styles, where we do a lot of voice acting, but we're still going to have some fun at the table and laugh along. Also, I just shared a link over with Nate. I think he'll be sharing it here in just a second. Go check out the Mistwalker. So also Drive Through RPG. We are, I think, still the number 2 seller under $5 right now, and the Mistwalker is a 5e class. It's not an archetype. It is like an entire class that I designed with the help of my brother and some input from Michael Hunt with Unmade Gaming. And I actually think I looked at the numbers. I think we're like 30 away from going platinum in like 6 weeks or something like that. So
Nice.
We're thrilled with how the feedback and everything has been on it. A little elevator pitch for it. It's kind of like what we took was like, imagine what would combat look like if Nightcrawler, you know, we had those type of abilities, and so we kind of have this mystic mist walker who can kind of do some teleportation things. He can manipulate the battlefield, and we have different archetypes for, you know, kind of Conviction of the Blade. Conviction of the Mind is much more strategic in positioning your allies around. Conviction of the Shroud is going to use that mystic energy of the mist to do, you know, vampiric transference, where you're pulling life out and feeding it to your party. And so we think it's a lot of fun. One thing that we wanted to kind of do with it was 5e combat sometimes can be a little boring with classes just standing around. So we specifically designed it to spice up combat and to make the player, you know, want to kind of move and use bonus actions and save their reactions and add in a little bit more strategy in combat. So if this sounds interesting to you, go check it out. We've got reviews up and stuff like that. I got a video up on it, and yeah, we got some preview pages up if you just want to read through it a little bit there over on Drive Through RPG. But yeah, go check that out. We get the Mistwalker
Awesome.
up there.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah, congrats on that. Doing really well, and yeah, great reviews. So go check it out. Jordan.
Man, that Saber Dice Numenera, just choice. You guys should all go watch that because it's actually really good. And it was my first foray into playing Numenera, and I love that system now. So, but I'm Jordan. You can find me on YouTube at /Jordan with a PH in the middle. And I do Forgotten Realms lore videos. We also have the Saturday morning D&D show, which actually needs more love than my Forgotten Realms channel, because we just moved the Saturday morning D&D show to its own YouTube channel. So if you Google the Saturday morning D&D show, you will find that, and you can go and subscribe. And if watching a video like this, I mean, you guys are watching a DM roundtable. The show is similar to this. We just a couple of DMs talking about their games. If you enjoy that, or if you want to experience it in podcast form, then search the Saturday morning D&D show, and you should find us. Oh, my kitten just walked behind us. He's
Truth.
Adorable. I get distracted. But yeah, just Google the Saturday morning D&D show, and I'm sure you'll find a whole bunch. We stream live on Twitch 9 a.m. Pacific at twitch.tv/Sirlucien, SIRLUCIEN. And that's my co-host's Twitch channel. So that's about it. Yeah. Go subscribe and hang out. It's awesome.
I've got one last thing to add. Nate, thank you so much for having me, my man. Oh my gosh, I had so much fun. True story. The first Provokers campaign is one of the significant impactors on me jumping into YouTube and taking the plunge to be a content creator. So to be on your channel, man, it is just such an honor. And I just want you to say you inspired me to get into doing this. And so for that, sir, I am incredibly
well, thank you, man.
grateful.
That means a lot. And yeah, it was an honor to have all you guys on here. I'm a big fan of all of your work. So this whole DM Roundtable is just a great excuse for me to get together with amazing people and talk. And I'm glad people like it. And thank you all again for you in the chat hanging out with us and viewing. And if you're watching this after the fact, you're pretty cool too. That is all we're going to be doing here tonight. Everybody take care, and you'll see us all again around the internets. Bye.
Stay nerdy.
See you later, everybody.